Hey everyone, what is going on? Today is Friday, March 27th. We are in the second week of our Roots and Chill initiative here at BlackProGen Live. We've got a lively group here reporting in from their shelter in place headquarters in several states. In fact, I think we have 5 different states represented today: New York, Virginia, Maryland, and Florida, along with Tennessee. We just want to check in with you guys, see how you are doing on this second week. Of course, the first question I have is, how is everyone? How is your health? And report from ground zero in your state. We'll start with Ellen.
It's good. I mean, things are good. It's getting pretty weird. There are a lot of people down here that aren't heeding the recommendations and stuff. And it's also really fascinating to see that this is split by party lines, which is, to me, that's just nuts. But anyway, the governor, I mean, I'd rather have the governor of New York down here than the one from Florida, but whatever. Otherwise, things are okay.
You wish you had Cuomo could have, like, you could be governor of multiple states at the same time.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And it's funny because, like, I'm housebound basically. Now everybody's into this.
Yeah, everyone's into housebound now. Exactly. You're like, this was my hobby before, like now you're encroaching on my space. Oh my gosh, Teresa, now I mean you are in the middle, you're in the throes. There's no irony to me that 2 of our BlackProGen Live panelists are literally in the eye of the storm in terms of diagnosed, people. Willie's in New Orleans, which is, blowing up right now in terms of people being diagnosed, and you are in New York. So what's going on there, since you have the governor that Ellen wants? Hold on, let me unmute you because you're muted. Go ahead, Teresa.
I love my governor today, but Teresa has been quarantined, so I ain't going anywhere. This is it. It's remarkable that people are still not practicing social distancing and also not wearing masks and protecting themselves. But hey, they've been warned and warned again. So I just pray for everybody. Give a big shout out to all the healthcare workers and the medical staff, the everyday dry Longso people, the janitors, the grocery clerks. I always say a prayer for them because they're on the front lines, and this is going to hurt us bad. We're not even going to be seeing the half of it. But when you look at who's being affected, it's our communities, people who are elderly, diabetic, hypertensive, autoimmune, you can say compromised, immune compromised, asthma, allergies, shebang. So we need to be praying times. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that, being in a state where there is no mandatory shelter in place. Although that's one thing I will say, a lot of the mayors of several cities have stepped up and issued those orders where the governors are not doing that. I know in Tennessee we don't have a mandate, but Memphis, as of Tuesday, it was shelter in place. And even people I know that have like desk jobs where they were, it was almost impossible for them to get work at home, are now working at home because those companies are still trying to get those things done. What's going on? What's going on in Maryland, James and Angela, who joined us, who kind of showed up? she kind of snuck in on the back end. James, you can go first. You're muted, BB.
I'm sorry about that. I've been home for the most part. I had to leave the house. I think the day before yesterday, I left and went and helped my niece move out of her college, and I ended up getting her mini fridge and microwave for the next few months. So it's here in my office. So I'm going to get some really good use out of it. On a more serious note, everybody just stay safe. I actually know a couple people who did contract the virus. One of whom actually did pass away over the weekend. He was an older gentleman. But I want to give us my prayers to the Stevenson family. Mr. David Stevenson passed away over the weekend, and he was somebody I known for a number of years. So I was very surprised, very, very surprised. So this thing is real. This thing is serious. So everybody, make sure that you stay safe and everything. Outside of that one little trip, I've barely left my home for the past 2 weeks. So just stay safe and keep everybody in your prayers, because this thing is rough.
Wow. So Cheryl Singleton, who's one of our viewers, is in the chat room and says she's a first responder in New York. And she says she's sick. And I asked her what kind of work she did. She said, we were forced to take off our masks. Now, since I've been homesick, memo dropped to allow us to wear our masks in uniform. So they weren't even given the okay to do that, to protect themselves. And to me, that falls right in line with what we saw with the news that I've seen in the last 24 hours with the CEO of Hobby Lobby saying that their employees are going to be still working in the states where there's no mandatory shelter in place, and that they're also not going to provide them with sick leave. They're not going to pay their sick leave either, even though they're forcing them to work in these conditions. It's just crazy. Angela, what say you? It is really criminal. And I honestly think that there needs to be somebody saying that they will file charges against these folks who are not, who are jeopardizing people's lives on purpose for their own personal gain. Angela?
Well, we've already heard. Be willing to die for the economy. You're part of the population that can die. And basically what they're saying is that we want you to die. And that's a really frightening thing, because this is coming from elected officials. This is coming from people whom society has put in place to trust, and to trust their leadership as well. And that is something that's really kind of frightening. And it's all the more reason why we need to be doing things on our own as individuals, even though we're social beings. But yeah, protect your house, your home, your family, feed yourself, rely as much as you can on yourself. And but we still have to go out, to venture out, to put something in the mailbox, or to retrieve something that we may need that we don't have. But it is really, really frightening, because we're living in an era now where people are becoming very, very bold to wish for your death, and to declare that you are part of an expendable population. And this is the era in which we live. And no one is really addressing that as yet. I'm also somewhat dismayed by these, which I don't pay attention a lot to polls, but I'm still kind of surprised to see these polls that are saying, oh, yes, the president's more popular than ever. Really? Every day we see this person appearing in health updates as if he has a health background, but we know he knows more than everyone, right? And so he believes. And we see the people not distancing themselves from him, but praising him, and really turning their thumbs up at society. And it's really a frightening time in which we live. And it's a time for just intelligent individuals to use their own head, and to take your own health and safety into your own hands, and really make sure that you're making decisions that are at least self-protective. And but it's a strange time here in Maryland. I will say that our governor has taken, I'll say, some leadership in terms of closing certain things in terms of public access. We don't have a stay in place order of any kind, but it's one in which almost all movement has slowed down. I live very close to the Beltway. All I see occasionally are the big trucks rolling by. Traffic is really slowed down. And so people are really saying, you know what, this is real. This is not something to really play with. And even if you don't have an N95 mask, if you have a scar, you have a mask. And so it's time to really just start to really think and say, okay, do I really need to go out for that container of juice that I thought I just so desperately needed, when drinking water is the best thing for you anyway? And so we really have to start thinking in terms of, without trying to sound alarmist, survival. You can survive without orange juice, but you cannot survive without water. And so we have to start really thinking, and not trying to sound like a prepper either, but there are some actions in which just sound thinking is called for, because those who are your leaders do not have your interest and your life at heart, and they are not taking that seriously. And as I think, as Teresa was pointing out, absolutely. And if you're part of a a population that is somewhat encumbered, then yeah, you are in danger, and we're all in danger. So we have to really be serious about things, more serious than we've been before. So.
I would definitely echo everything that Angela is saying, and I would also add to that. This is no respecter of persons. And so for us to even be having a conversation along political lines around who gets to live and who gets to die, to me is completely asinine and is completely unacceptable. And one of the things that I'm sure, I don't know how you all feel, but I'm sort of taking a step back sometimes from watching the news on this because it can become overwhelming. But one of the things that I actually like that local media is doing is they're amplifying the stories of the everyday people that are dying so that folks can connect with that and see, oh my God, if you don't take precautions, that this could be you. And in some ways, I feel like that is a direct call against what the president is saying. Like in some ways, that's the way the media is choosing to pivot on those things and not choose the messaging that he is saying or that he is espousing to people. And just in my circle of folks, I know two people that have it that are on opposite coasts. One is in California and the other one is in Illinois. Her and her husband have it. They're very asymmatic. The other person I know in California is not. It's very, it's very serious for her. In fact, one of my cousins in Detroit, they have a whole, stepping community, stepping dancing, that we do. And their community is imploded. Like they're trying to figure out the event that everyone went to because like 8 people have died in their community and they're like, what dance was it that everyone was at where all these folks contracted it? And they just shared a link to the group where, they would, hey, we're going to have this dance on this day. And it's literally obituaries. Like, it's like 7 or 8 or 9, like even more like, oh, and this person is sick. Like we're trying to figure out which event everyone went to that infected everybody. In fact, one of our viewers in the chat room right now, Karen Galloway, she says someone tested positive at her job. So she's on quarantine.
I know
I have
a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I have to say, I sort of self-quarantined myself because I had to travel through LAX and through San Francisco airports 2 weeks ago. So, I have not left. I went to the grocery store Monday. That's the first time I've left the house in 2 weeks. Just because I was in a place that had cases, I just didn't want to expose my household. My son is asthmatic. I did not want to expose him. My in-laws have comorbidities, right? Like, no, I wasn't trying to take that chance. Angela, what were you going to say? You're muted. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay, there I am. Okay. Now, what I was going to say is that sometimes we really don't know how something is passed. For example, I was at the archives on March the 6th. That was the day that one person plus 5 other people whom she was with later contracted or tested positive for COVID-19. And it does not mean that they got it at the archives. Did they go out to lunch together? Did they go out to dinner together afterwards? Did they run into someone who said, hi, I haven't seen you for a while, on the metro, gave them a hug? We don't know. For example, those people you were talking about in the dancing group, someone could have run into them. Oh, you guys are going to be there tonight. I can't make it. This person gave that person a hug, didn't go. And meanwhile, they may have been symptomatic or passed it on to that person. It's so difficult to determine where that exposure came. Did it all come in the same place at the same time? Was it a person from the outside who infected one who then spread it around, maybe in one of their classes, one of their rehearsals? It's so difficult to determine that. And is it spread person to person, touching? Is it spread breathing the same air? Is it spread touching the doorknob and you touch the same doorknob? It's like that little video. It's kind of funny, but not so funny. The guy washing his hands and he's so proud of himself. Then he shuts the nozzle off and he's like, oh my God, I just touched the nozzle. Then he washes off the nozzle. And then he's like, okay, I got that. He touches then the surface. Oh my God, I gotta wash that down. And it goes on and on. Because we don't know. And that's what makes this even more frightening. Is this something that, again, is spread multiple ways? And it probably is multiple ways. As I think, Nika, you and I were talking just the other day. Remember when we were children and, your mom would send you over to play with somebody because they had the measles, so you'd get the measles, or the chicken pox party, so the children would all get it, and and they're not, necessarily touching the same doorknob, but they're playing, they're interacting, passing the ball or whatever they're doing, and through exposure, then the child contracts it, and then they're finished with the childhood diseases. Now, of course, you have the immunizations that are there. We don't know how this is spread. That's even more strange about it. It's kind of the same way we were talking in the early days back in the 80s when AIDS became an epidemic in many communities, and how was it spread? Was it human contact? Was it the rhesus monkey or something? And then it was affecting the male homosexual population. But then heterosexuals started contracting it as well. So, oh, well, it's strictly sexual contact, really? Bodily fluids. I mean, again, we don't know. And we don't know about this virus either. Of course, in my own opinion, I think it was probably man-made in somebody's lab and it's all gone awry, but that's
that's our contagion theory.
Yeah.
That's our contagion theory. But I mean, the thing is, just be diligent, turn into your mama. I don't know if my mama was a bleacher and a Lysoler. And I'm not talking about the Lysol we got now. I'm talking about that industrial strength in that brown container. Baby, where you only use the cap full because the whole house smells like an old woman with a wheelchair or something, and she's got that chalk candy on the table in the living room. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Make sure you go above and beyond on all that stuff and limit your time out. And just want to definitely give our thoughts and prayers to Cheryl Singleton in our chat room, who is on the front lines, as well as several other of our viewers that we know that our first responders can't call out because they are in essential jobs. And people just, their fears and their worries and their concerns. And, just as you were talking about with the AIDS and the HIV epidemic, that I remember vividly growing up, this is not a respecter of person and a respecter of income. And that's why these stories about celebrities and other people, notable folks getting this and dying, are just as important as these, these younger people who are getting it. So, so we definitely want to support you all through this process, which is why we're doing this, which is why we're having these chats, while we're doing the weekly themes, which is why, Tuesday we are we're doing crew chat. We're talking about good times. It's a way for us as a community to kind of galvanize together and to do something that is different than watching the news and getting sick, and not so much getting sick, but getting sick emotionally. And for, just towards everything that's going on. Renata, how are you in Virginia with all this?
Here in Virginia, pretty much everything is shut down. We don't have a formal stay in place order, but our governor, as well as our local mayors, have been pretty adamant about getting the message out of no groups bigger than 10. Actually, in my area, they've asked no groups bigger than 3. After I get off this call, I just take rides because I've been here by myself for almost 3 weeks now, and it's a little nerve-wracking. So I just get in the car and take rides, and I'm gonna go out to the beach. We have an 80-degree day today. When I did this last Friday, we also had a very warm day. There were people out on the beaches, not really distancing themselves. And my thing about the beach is the way the wind blows, you don't really, 6 feet is nothing because you can get droplets from, 20 feet away or whatever. So, I live on the Virginia Peninsula, which is where several of the cases have kind of been congregated for the state of Virginia. And we did just lose the wife of one of our Fort Eustis military base service members, which is about 5 minutes from my house. And that death was just announced last night. Both he and his wife have it or had it, but his wife succumbed. So we're just being careful. And I just have to say, the kindest, most wonderful thing happened to me just before we came on the air. The family of one of the two of the children that I tutor stopped by my house and dropped a big bag of supplies off. And I don't need all that because I'm just by myself, but my 2 daughters are in New York City. And I'm getting boxes ready for them, and I'm going to send the stuff up to them because I just don't want them leaving the house. So yeah, this is really something. Our schools are closed, as Nika mentioned, until next school year. And it's that when that happened, it just really made it all very, very real for me. Like, this is really happening. It's really something.
Isn't
Well,
it interesting? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
Go
no, I
ahead.
was just going to say it brings back to me so much historic trauma when I think of my second great grandmother dying of tuberculosis. And then you think of the smallpox epidemic, typhoid. It just brings back a lot of historic trauma that we're dealing with this now in an age where we have all this communication. But back then they had nothing. And imagine
Yeah.
how nerve-wracking that was. But we have instantaneous, we can find out what's happening across the world, but you go back and you're thinking
pretty
how scary
quickly.
it was.
Well,
Yeah.
and I don't know if we talked about this on here, but like I know I've had conversations with folks, like even when we go back to like the Spanish flu stuff, right?
Mhm.
Number one, you had to have literacy to be able to read a newspaper, the finances to be able to afford a subscription, right? Then from that point, to be able to afford medical care, to be able to care for whoever was sick in your household, right? And then same thing with tuberculosis, right? It going through families and things like that. But that's a whole lot of steps. Now it's, if there's a shelter in place order, I'm going to get a thing to my phone that goes to every cell phone in the whole entire state, right? And then I also have access to newspapers. So I don't have to necessarily read one point of view regarding on what I should be doing. I can read multiple different points of view. The fact that we have that, the fact that information is getting to us so much faster, but at the same token, right, that also may take a toll on you emotionally because it's a bombardment of information that you're getting. And so I would just suggest to everyone, take the needed break that you need to take from news. Especially don't feel bad that you have to take it, because it's a lot to absorb, especially if you're in an environment like Teresa is, where it's ground zero, where it's
club
just
quarantine all the
exactly
way.
right. Like get your D nice on, then follow up with Questlove on
Questlove.
YouTube. Yes. Subscribe to the Roots YouTube channel so you can see that, or follow D Nice on Instagram, which I love how they've mobilized his thing. They're registering people to vote who are watching the simulcast of him DJing, and how other people, just do whatever you can to flatten the curve. And I know our community we don't really have to be pushed for this, because we're gonna hunker down. If you give us time off, we're gonna hunker down, be at the computer looking at rolls of microfilm that we couldn't look at before, right? Like, I don't really think we have that big of a problem, but it's just other folks. And yeah, just down the street, it was 86 degrees here, and we have a basketball court down the street from my house, and there were people down there playing basketball yesterday, younger folks. And let me just kind of bring this home before we go get into the theming for this week's Roots and Chill. Take a look at the story from the LA Times about a 17-year-old who died from this. And the reason why I'm bringing your attention to that is because this young man went to an urgent care center and was turned away because he did not have health insurance.
I read that.
He didn't have health insurance, and he had all the symptoms, and they turned him away. And then once he got to the ambulance and he coded and they kept him alive for 6 hours, he died.
Crazy.
And his father has it. So we're having to reckon in our communities with resources not being appropriated appropriately. We're dealing with class issues. Really, a lot of this is class. Really, it is. It's all class. It's all class, right? Which is why we're saying it's not a respecter of person. It's completely class. And just, gosh, we could go.
They don't even have numbers.
Don't even talk about Rikers.
People are gone.
But you look in New York, Rikers Island. You look at Brooklyn. I was watching Elmhurst, Queens. People lining up sick to take the tests. People running to hospitals. That's the last place you want to be.
Right.
But there's no choice because they have no place to go. They want to go because they don't want to infect their families. But it's crazy, know?
And I've had a dilemma with my daughters, especially the one that has the 2 children. She lives in Brooklyn, and she and her partner and the 2 babies have been in now for, a little over 2 weeks. a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. And I feel like they need to get out of New York, and I want them to come here. But at the same time, I'm an immune compromised person, and we have to be realistic and smart about it because they are coming from New York.
Right.
So as of right now, that's put on hold. But I just feel like, how long does it make sense for them to stay in that situation in a tiny little New York apartment with a toddler that needs to get out and run and play, when I have a home with a yard and 3 bedrooms and plenty of space in a totally different environment? So we may do something where I may have them come, and then I may go self-quarantine somewhere else or something for a few days. But it's just such a dilemma wanting them out of there. My other daughter's in Harlem with her husband and her dog. She has to take that dog out 2 or 3 times a day to go to the bathroom. So she's passing people on the sidewalk, as Teresa,
I do
knows.
when no one's around.
Right, you do it late at night, and it just is hard for me as a mother, especially being here all alone. And I do know that I am internalizing a lot of stress. I went off on a lady from Waterworks on Wednesday who called me about a bill, and I just lost it all over her because she was just a little bit rude and I was not in the mood. So, I know that we all, are probably dealing with stress, whether we're expressing it or not.
Well, I think this is a great pivot. You guys, we're really lucky because we not only have a first responder who's an officer in New York, we also have a family physician in the chat room today. And this is Valencia Andrews Pirtle. She says, I'm a family physician and my husband is also a physician working in the ER today. This has been very stressful, but it is difficult to admit the stress when you're the provider. That's very, very true. And that's one of the things that I've been doing, has been reading accounts from doctors and people saying they're not reporting enough of these deaths or these diagnoses with what we're seeing. It's not adding up. And so, whatever you believe, send your good energy, your prayers, your thoughts out to the folks that are on the front lines, not just the nurses and the doctors and the people working within the hospital system, but also the folks that work at the grocery stores, people at gas stations, any essential services. We really need to love on those folks and let them know that they are appreciated. And that, and your way of contributing to this, of course, is staying at home. And our way of helping you to stay at home is to participate in these challenges that we're giving you. So this week we are dealing with births and deaths. And it has been really interesting, some of the stuff that I have come across. If you all follow us on Facebook, I shared something that Yvette Porter-Moore, one of our genealogy buddies, posted on her page, which were these cosmetology licenses or applications for licenses in the state of California, where they have all the information. I love the skills a person had to have. They had to be able to, can you pin curl? Can you put somebody under? It was just so cute. And they had the picture of the person right there. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And the reason why I bring this up this week is because that's another way that's not a traditional source for you to get information for a birth date, because one of the things that the people had to fill in for that particular record was their birth date. And so I think I pulled another example. Of course, I'm selfish because I pulled it from Oakland because I wanted to see someone from Oakland who had one of these. And naturally, of course, Angela is not on here anymore. She kind of dropped off. We'll see if she drops back on. But the person that I found was someone with the last name Queen. And there's Alberta Queen down there at the bottom of this document. This is her hairdresser and cosmetician license for the state of California. She had to provide her photos like, hey girl, what's going on, girl? How you doing? And then we come over, this is from 1945. Look at the experience, Marcel waving. I've got to find out what that is. Do we know what Marcel waving is?
I thought it was a curl, a type of curl.
I don't know. I'm going to be YouTubing
Wasn't
all of this.
It the ones with the two sort of like my grandmother used to, had 2 little roller things that you used?
You asking the wrong person. I don't know. I know what pin curling is. And I know what paper curling is. And it says hairdressing, permanent waving, finger waving, right? You to be able to, this is all your experience. And then it lists where she went to school. It lists when she completed her course. She did 3 years of public high school, her birth date. This is what's important to us because we're talking about births and deaths this week, and where she lived in Oakland, and the fact that she was born in Winfield, Louisiana. That's just one of the documents, right? And then if you go over to the next one, it's several pages. This is just one page of the actual application, where it talks about her experience and where she worked and all this. This is on an application for a license to be a cosmetologist in the state of California. And there are always going to be several things that are like that. Yes, I think somebody on the panel can show us what a Marcel wave looks like. Let me make sure this is turned on. There you go. Okay, you should be able to do it now, Renata.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, now we know what the Marcel wave looks like.
Right.
Pretty
Pretty too.
1920s, yeah.
Yeah. Even though her situation was 20 years later, but still it's
Right.
appropriate. So that's the Marcel wave, which in
Okay.
some ways I would think that some of our
So
people
that's
would
what I was
assume that
thinking.
was a finger wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like some people would think that was, but
But
they're
you saw the
clearly,
picture with the
That's what I
iron.
thought
My
when I
grandmother
saw it.
used to have it.
yeah.
It's a
So
little, it was a little double thing. Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
just a
if
finger
you know
wave.
what
The
you know
iron.
what? That's what I thought. Like,
It
because
is
we
a
But it
we
has
used to call
double.
that with the crunch. Yeah, where it's
Right,
like it's like
yeah.
this wide.
I
it's
got
like-
one in my
My
bathroom.
grandmother would always, my grandmother
became
would
a
always use the
crimper.
hot comb.
Yes.
That became a crimper
Crimping
later.
iron. Yes.
It's a
a
crimping
crimping
iron. Yeah, because
Missy
remember in the
Elliott's
'90s, girl, we used to have it the thump, this
Mhm.
thump,
Mm-hmm.
and you would on that side, or maybe you right here, and then the rest would be straight. Yes. So if people in the chat room are saying Alberta Queen has skills, I think she did because she marked a lot of her boxes on her application. But yeah, Missy Elliott, yes, you're right. That whole era, that was Missy had a Marcel wave. Oh, we gonna have to tweet her and be like, girl, that's what your hair looked like. But
I need some guy friends.
whatever, James. But the larger point is that her birth date and birth information was on a document that was not a birth certificate, right? Something else we covered, if you follow us on social media, the Lord, did Dante Eubanks say he just got to the barbershop? Apparently he's watching this and he just got to the barbershop.
He said, I just go to the barbershop.
I just go to the barbershop. Okay, he just goes to the barbershop. Something else that I shared were burial permits, not an obituary, but burial permits that were applied for that were posted in the newspaper. Those can confirm a death. It's not that traditional. It's just literally says the person's name, where they lived. That is a touch point. That is not a death certificate that can confirm a death. So what else have you guys come across this week? And you're looking at births and deaths. Ellen, I loved your example. In fact, I think I'm gonna pull yours down from our little group so people can see, because I love that, and especially how they tried to describe your grandfather. That was hilarious to me.
Yeah, I mean, I finally found my grandfather's birth certificate. I was just really kind of taken for a long time, just wondering, like, what did they miss him? Like, what happened? So I finally found him, and it was because he was using they registered him with his mother's maternal surname, which also points to that whole tension between when a kid gets recognized or not a generation earlier. So it winds up with my grandfather's certificate, and I compared it to his passport, which at the 1920s is just a sheet of paper. And it said that he was born, and this is the date we celebrated, 31st of August, 1900. Then you get the birth certificate, and it's like October 11, 1911. So there's no real way to cross-reference these documents, I guess, at that time period. We can see this now. But the passport is really interesting because it does what a lot of other documentation do, try to take account, or kind of a written account of a person's appearance. So they speak about a round mouth or some features that people aren't really concerned with, because a photograph just basically replaced that. Even those photographs right there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ellen, when in Puerto Rico did they stop using?
Oh no, he was in New York when
he was in New York. Okay.
1920s. So there are different documents that I've been able to get a hold on him in New York, but they all had this 31 October 1900 date, which was totally off.
Wow. And of course, we trust the authorities because this is, I have both documents. I'm going to put them up so everyone can see these. And I personally loved the handwriting on the passport one and the asinine description of him. It was asinine. It was. That's just the only word you can use for this.
That's the second time you said asinine in this episode.
Because that's asinine. So this is the passport for Grandpa from the Department of State, which is, isn't that, doesn't somebody on the panel work for the State Department?
For now.
Somebody on the panel does. And so here we go. So we're going down employment and travel, wife, and 3 minor children.
I love the pictures.
With the picture, the babies are like, look, see, they gonna put a staple through the baby face right here. I don't appreciate that. But look at these descriptions. This is the part that just drove me crazy. Mouth, medium. Chin, I guess that's supposed to be round. Yeah. Hair, black. Forehead, medium. We're doing forehead size at this point. Complexion, fair. Nose, straight. Face, guess that's supposed to be round. And then Puerto Rico. And then the date of birth, August 31st. Alleged birth, August 31st, 1900. And then we've got let me get out of here. Then we've got the actual birth record. So clap, clap, clap to Ellen for being able to find this. So this is the actual acta de nacimiento, act of birth, para sus abuelos. And me and Chandler are working on our Spanish. So he's learning about mama and papa and people. And so if you look at, talks about the dad, it's got basic form. And then talks about it's a legitimate declaration. We know what that means. And where they lived, domicilidad, or where they were domiciled in, Puerta de Sierra, Registro Civil.
Puerta de Tierra. It's in San Juan. It's just out. It's where all of the cruise ships dock. That's that neighborhood.
Ah, look at us getting context. Okay,
I've been there. Oh,
I have too.
So have
Me too.
I think that's the first time everybody on the panel has been to where somebody's ancestor was born, outside of like New York. You know what I mean? Like, or LA or something like that, right? This is so cool. Gosh, Ellen, look at you answering questions.
He also has like, we know him as Fernandez Matos, but he's registered as Carrillo, and that's basically what the problem. And then Catalina, my great grandmother, she would use these two surnames, Matos and Carrillo, over time, back and forth and back and forth. So it really becomes a challenge, a little bit of a challenge to like locate her. And I got to meet her in the 60s when I was a kid.
Wow. So here's the question. Did you find this on Family Search?
Yeah, this is on Family Search.
Ah, and was it in the catalog?
What do you mean the catalog?
In the catalog, like it wasn't just you had to type in a name and search and it popped up, or was it you had to go through the catalog?
Oh no,
it's a civil registration. Yeah,
it's a
some
civil
of the
registration.
Transcriptions made it. I don't know for what reason. I couldn't really pull it up on it. I tried on Ancestry because Family Search crashed. Yes, I don't know if people realized that yesterday. Beyond there, nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then, I went over to Ancestry and it wouldn't come up. It just would not come up. And then I went back to Family Search later and picked it up. But yeah.
But the naming that your grandmother used or great grandmother used is really interesting, because I had the same problem when my grandmother came over from Puerto Rico. Her actual name was Maria Noboa, but when she came here, she changed her name to May Banda.
Huh.
And if you don't know, you think she's lost forever.
Find her.
Yeah, to answer the question in the chat room, someone was asking about the cosmetology licenses. Those are on Ancestry. If you browse, like instead of doing, from the search page, go to where they have the map of the United States, drill down to California, and then go to lists at the bottom of the page, and you'll see, and it's not just cosmetology, it's physicians, it's pharmacists, it's nurses. Some of the records are like just directories for those people, but then for some of them, they're the actual licenses. And the ones that I did find in that case were the cosmetologists. And so, yeah, I would say if you had anybody who applied for one of those in the state, I would or migrated out there. Maybe even do a search just on the one horse town your family's from in the South, migratory, right? Especially if you have Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, or Texas roots. Look for your cosmetologist, female ancestors within those licensure records to see if they're in there. Renata?
Yes, I wanted to share something that helped me. It wasn't this week, it was a while ago. I have the actual receipt from 1935 when my great grandmother purchased a cemetery plot with actually 6 spaces in it. And she did that because my great grandfather had just died, but 5 of those 6 spaces are now filled with my family members. And when I found that receipt several years ago, it was so helpful to me that doesn't tell me when someone died, but it tells me where someone is buried. And then of course, finding out where they were buried led me to be able to find out when the person had died by interacting with the cemetery office. I actually did a blog post about this. If it's okay with Nika, I'll share in the chat room. But that's just another thing. So if you can go and get in touch with funeral homes to find, if you don't have a receipt like I did, you can check funeral homes to see if their records are extant, and you may find where your ancestors are buried, and then that can lead you to finding dates and other information about them. So
Great
is it
suggestion.
Okay? Post
Yeah,
that link?
you feel free to share that in the chat room, James.
I had something as well. So the last time we did Roots and Chill, I talked a little bit about John Chapman, and who was a neighbor of my McBride ancestors. For those who may not know, my 4 times great grandparents, Joe and Jane McBride, they actually died within 4 days of each other because of the Spanish flu outbreak. So they've been on my mind, quite a bit with all this current stuff that we have going on. The thing that I found, and I'm happy to share it. Let me go here and open this up. Is I've been looking at the Alabama. Let me make sure I tell you guys the right name of it. So when you go search for it yourself, if you go on Family Search, they have the Alabama birth index from 1881 to 1929. And the thing that's so interesting about this, and let's do a screen share if that's all right. Let's see here. Where is my preview? All right. Can you all see that document?
Yep, we sure can.
Mhm.
Beautiful. So the thing I want you to focus on, if you can see it on your screens there, I'm going to go down here and you'll see the name of Jane. There you go, Jane McBride. Now the thing that's odd about these indexes is a birth index, but they don't tell you much about the child, but they tell you about the parents. So we see here, this document is from, the date is up here. Oops, over here on the left. So this is from November of 1892. Okay, when we scroll down here to my ancestors, Joe and Jane McBride. So November 11th of 1892, they had a female child was born to Jane and to Joe. The thing that's really interesting about this for me, though, is that the daughter of Joe and Jane McBride that I'm descended from, her name was Alberta McBride Townsend. She was actually a midwife. And I've been very curious lately about the history of Black midwives, particularly in Alabama and whatnot. But the problem is, and this may be something, if anyone's listening to some of these big like Family Search or Ancestry, I really wish that there was a way where we could find out more about the midwives when they're documented, right? Or who the birthing doctors are. This index is a perfect example of why, because when we scroll over here all the way to the right, there's a column here that says for doctor, the midwife, or the head of family. And the thing that was so awesome for me is that if you see right here the name MARIAH Ross,
Mhm.
MARIAH Ross was the midwife for this particular birth in my McBride ancestry, and she happens to be a relative of mine as well on another branch of my family through my my Flowers and Ross line. The Flowers and Ross families were neighbors to the McBrides, and at the time, as far as I know, they weren't related. But when you take these people another 2 generations down, their grandkids end up getting married, and that's how I got here. So to be able to have 3 ancestors of mine on the same document, who otherwise, you'll find them on the census record, maybe together, but this shows a bit more of a relationship. right? And then the thing that I have to wonder now also is it possible that my 5 times great grandmother MARIAH on one side of my family, is it possible that she maybe taught my 3 times great grandmother on another side of my family the business and the trade of being a midwife? I don't know, but that's something to speculate on. You know,
There are
I wouldn't know about
programs.
that if I didn't have that.
There are also programs you have to see if but that I know that definitely in the 1930s there were programs for midwives, like in Puerto Rico and stuff. And then or before that, there were smaller programs for women to get some of those skills. But my question for you was like, have you seen how many infants she has delivered in that birth record?
Yeah, if you look at the record itself,
how many of them were there? Like, like if you went through the pages, were there a few?
Yeah, there were.
Oh,
You
cool.
see a lot of the same name. From what I saw, you see a lot of the same names. So people were using the same people. And what I did find also was that, there was very much a racial element to it, obviously. So, white people using the same white people, the black people using the same black people over and over again. And so I'm very curious to learn more about that. And actually, I have some books in my Amazon wish list right now about Black midwives in the South and in Alabama in particular. Because I think it's a really probably an understudied, well, I don't want to say understudied, I'm going to say I've understudied it. I haven't studied it enough, but maybe there's somebody out there who knows more about it than I do. But I'm very fascinated by the not just the craft of being a midwife, but also what documentation has been left behind. Because now that I see that this is there, I want to go try to find records where not only where MARIAH Ross, but also where Alberta McBride Townsend. I haven't found any of hers yet, but I know she was a midwife. So now I want to see who was she birthing, what families were my ancestors, working for. That's an important aspect as well. Of course, you want the genealogy information for the child, but also to learn about who were delivering these babies in these various communities. I think that's very important, and maybe we need to explore that some more.
Well, and I think the system that they have at Fold 3 makes it more kind of organic to document these things, right? You talked about going through the record and seeing the name repeated several times, but that's not what was chosen to be indexed on these records, right? Even if it is indexed or not. With Fold 3, they do give you the ability to annotate records, to add names and things like that. And so that in some ways is why I kind of like that system. Not every site is set up like that though, because an idea that I had, yet still another not, traditional form of a birth record, are DAWS cards, right? They have the approximate age for people. It's right there. But a field that is not indexed is slave of.
Right.
That's a ton of information right there, because right now we can't quantify how many people were listed as folks enslaved on those cards because that's not indexed. It's not indexed on Family Search. I don't even think we have them on Family Search. It's not indexed on Fold 3 and it's not indexed on Ancestry. So how do you know, right, if you're doing a study like you're talking about, James, how do you even know who all was owned by the same people?
Right.
You literally have to go card by card, maybe looking 100 before, 100 after your people, because folks would kind of go in together to get registered. But that brings up an important point. When are we going to have the ability to go in, just like how we can go in and do corrections when things are spelled incorrectly in the indexes? When are we going to have the ability to go in and annotate records to add additional information? So if you want to start your own grassroots project, like you said, for cataloging the midwives or the doctors in these births, or me adding the slave holders for the enslaved population, we don't currently have, we only have that available on one site. And is that being championed inside of Family Search as an option to add additional indexing? I don't know. I can't answer that question.
I can't either, but I know somebody that will call to make that suggestion. But yeah, no, I think it's important. They did this. I actually found out about this index through our friend Tom Reed when they were doing the 29 Ways in 29 Days campaign for Black History Month. And I'm gonna put a link in our public chat for our friend Robin Foster. She did a nice blog post about this for the International African American Museum about this particular registry. So I want to encourage folks to check that out as well. And then also, while I still have the floor, I want to say I'm gonna put another link in the chat as well for Amy Johnson Crow did a really good blog and podcast about what life was like for our ancestors during the Spanish flu epidemic, which also kind of has informed some of my research lately around that line of my family. So I'm going to share that as well.
All right. Anything else before we wrap up? Renata, you're on mute. Looks like you're trying to say something.
I was just saying, I also did a blog post, a short one, looking at life during the 1918, 1919 pandemic and comparing it today. So I'll grab that real quick and put it in there too.
Okay, great. Any other resources you guys can think of, other finds and things that people should look out on the radar for? Very quiet.
James covered a lot. He did.
He did. Here, Teresa, hold on, you're muted. Okay, go ahead.
I've been scouring through newspaper articles to find tidbits here and there, and I've had a lot of luck lately. But I know in my family, you know, and especially other people's too. I think James mentioned this, and I think Nika did, where in newspaper articles we found one ancestor who lived to be like 110 years old, and he held George Washington's like horse when he stopped by in New Jersey, all these things. But the interesting thing about the article was he was listed as a half-breed. So we know it was indigenous, and we're thinking it's Afro-Indigenous, but we just located one DNA cousin through that link, Y-link that we can test to see. But newspaper articles for me have a lot of tidbits if you look.
I agree. I agree. So moving forward, week 3, your job, should you choose to accept it, is to look at marriages and unions, and particularly focus on people you have not found and or untraditional records. Don't look for the marriage license, right? Try to find proof of marriage in other documents, especially if you can't find it. We got a message on Facebook. Someone was looking for a death record for an ancestor that was not on the 1900 census, and they were trying to find a death certificate. And I'm like, well, you have to use other means to do so. You can't expect the death certificate that early unless you're in a major metropolitan area, right? So when do they fall off of tax records? When did they, you know, when maybe there was something in the newspaper, have you searched for that, right? So follow the same methodology for next week's theme, which is marriages and unions. And then of course, we'll come back together next Friday and talk about those things and what we've located. And hopefully we'll have another happy celebration like for what we had for Ellen in medium forehead grandpa.
If somebody can find me a record like that says big forehead, I'll buy you lunch.
Yeah, well, you know what? The only thing we get really like physical descriptions like that on is like draft cards, right? Like I always love to find people that are missing a hand or a finger, or I have an eye or eye put out. You know, I love eye put out. Like that's one of my favorites. Ellen, what were you gonna say?
No, I'm just thinking of prison photos, you know. They
Yes.
also make these kind of specifications, which are from the Bertillon system. And the forehead thing is more about the hairline. You know, like some people's hairline come down really low and other people's isn't. And I think that's kind of like part of it.
Maybe. There's
a
lot of good suggestions in the chat room. Of course, Shelley is always going to champion the Historical Society because that's her thing. Another comment I'll throw out there, one of our viewers, Jordan Brunson, said, I got a funeral home record last week after some phone begging. It sounds like he put on his Key Sweat at the he put on his Key Sweat voice to the mortuary to give him that record. Maybe we need to have him call and put on his Key Sweat for some of us. Maybe he's got a very persuasive voice. I don't know. But anywho, he called a funeral home dry begging for his great grandmother's record, and it lists how her hair was done at the funeral, and that the wake was in her living room. I don't think I've ever heard of a record. And so I told him, go back to Alberta Queen's license and look at the terms and see if some of those translate into how her hair was done, because he might be able to find a picture of that. And that's great. That's great content. Jordan said, listen, I know he keeps sweating that funeral director. I know he did.
Y'all make me really nervous about hair right now, because I'm really debating in my mind, right? If this quarantine, because I've been home for 2 weeks, if this quarantine keeps going, I'm debating, do I cut my own hair for the first time?
Oh,
you and a lot of other people are debating. That's big.
I've been doing it for years.
Hairdressers. And
I have clippers. I have clippers. I got
you have the stuff.
You got the stuff.
You know, if it goes on too much longer, maybe I'll let the BlackProGen community decide.
A heart for be cutting it,
Right.
a retweet for don't cut it,
Right.
you know, like something like that. Be sure to make sure that you join us on Tuesday, March 31st. We're having our next crew chat, which is our official Twitter chat. It's so much fun for Good Times. You're going to be talking about the show Good Times. In fact, I tweeted out a link last night. I don't know if you all saw this. This was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Saturday Night Live did a parody of Good Times with Janet Jackson playing Penny still. And she sounds exactly the same, even though she's a grown woman. And then Maya Rudolph was several people. She was Thelma, and then she was also Bologna. And then Kenan Thompson was Florida Evans. And it was hilarious because it played on all the tropes that they used to do on Good Times, and it kind of fell flat in areas because the audience clearly did not watch the show like we all watched the show to even know that like some of these things, like it's just hilarious. So be sure to join us at 8 p.m. Central for the next crew chat, which is on March 31st. Of course, that's Tuesday, and then Friday of next week we're going to be meeting with you about marriages and unions. So be sure, you know, we're going to give you some instructions on Sunday on things to look for and to do to look in for untraditional ways to confirm marriages or unions within your family history project. And then I'm trying to think, when's the next live show? Lord, April 14th, North and South Carolina genealogy research. But before that, we have another crew chat on Boys in the Hood on April 7th. We're hitting like all the 70s and 80s and 90s stuff in crew chat. So be prepared for that as well. Of course, reach out to us. Ask Mariah is always open for submission. So if you have a question, in fact, Shelly is looking through stuff now to see if she can knock some of those episodes that are out later on in the year. We have another really good episode of History Unscripted. Be sure to look at that. That dropped this Tuesday. We had a great conversation there. We have another one that we're filming shortly. It's all about DNA. And when you find out that a parent is not your parent and you didn't know, and not from the perspective of, oh, I have a cousin, we'll actually be talking to people that experience this firsthand. You hardly ever get to hear from those people, especially when they look like us. So be on the lookout for that because we'll be filming that soon. And I'm sure that's going to be probably one of our most watched episodes of History Unscripted, no lie. So thank you guys for taking time out on your Friday afternoon. We love you. Get to work on your marriages and unions. Make sure you document your births and whether or not you have a round nose or a straight nose or a flat forehead. And don't forget to dry beg to your funeral director so they can tell you how your great grandmother's hair looked in her casket and where her wake was.